Welcome to Nightline. I'm Brandon Wong. Our top stories. Over 1,000 university students return home on Monday night. And Exco Prihatin screening program for essential workers begins. Good morning. The current global COVID-19 pandemic was among the topics discussed between Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin and the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim Hamad Al Thani, on Monday. Tan Sri Muhyiddin, who received a telephone call from the Qatari Emir, said Sheikh Tamim followed closely the measures taken by Malaysia to curb the spread of the disease. Apart from the virus infection, the two leaders also discussed bilateral relations and interests between the two countries. Tan Sri Muhyiddin said Sheikh Tamim also congratulated him on being appointed as the Prime Minister of Malaysia. He added that Sheikh Tamim has also invited him to visit Qatar after the COVID-19 pandemic is over. The first batch of university students who have been stuck on campuses since the MCO began returned to their hometowns on Monday night. Over 1,000 students from 9 universities travelled home in 49 buses, which were sanitized before their journey home. Senior Minister for Security Cluster Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob also visited University Malaya on Monday night to inspect the whole process. Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob said 863 students from the Central Zone were transported to the Northern Zone on Monday night. Another 265 students will travel in the opposite direction to return home on Tuesday night.
Setibanya di drop off point, iaitu di Balai Polis dan pejabat daerah, hanya satu keluarga yang dibenarkan untuk mengambil mereka di balai-balai polis tersebut. Walaupun kita percaya ada pelajar-pelajar yang keluarga mereka tidak mempunyai kenderaan untuk mengambil mereka. Jadi seperti yang saya sebutkan, barisan hadapan di daerah ataupun frontliners di daerah akan menghantar mereka ke rumah masing-masing. Jadi bas akan dijangka tiba di zon utara tersebut. Kalau bertolak malam ni, dijangka tiba pukul 9 pagi besok.
Students who are returning to Sarawak and Sabah will start flying home on May the 1st. Those in Terengganu and Kelantan will be flown home from the Sultan Mahmud Airport in Kuala Terengganu, while those in the Central Zone like Pahang will be flying off from the KL International Airport. Students in the Northern Zone will be taking off from the Penang International Airport, and students in the Southern Zone will be flying off from the Sinai International Airport in Johor. The Enhanced Movement Control Order EMCO, enforced in 2 areas in Simpang Renggam, Johor, will end on Tuesday. These 2 villages in Johor were the first in the country to be placed under the EMCO, initially from March 27 to April the 9th, before being extended first to April the 14th and then for a second time to April the 28th. Senior Minister for Security Cluster Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob said, as such, the restrictions under the strict lockdown imposed at the 2 villages would be lifted and residents would only have to adhere to the standard MCO implemented nationwide. Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri, however, said the EMCO in 2 specific premises in Sungai Lui, Hulu Langat, Selangor would have their orders extended for another week.
PKPD di Kampung Datuk Ibrahim Majid dan Bandar Baru Datuk Ibrahim Majid di Simpang Renggam, Keluang, Johor akan ditamatkan pada hari esok 28 hari bulan April 2020. Maknanya segala sekatan lockdown dan sebagainya telah akan ditarik balik di PKPD Simpang Renggam. Manakala di PKPD Sungai Lui, Hulu Langat, Selangor yang melibatkan pusat tahfiz dan sebuah rumah disambung 1 minggu lagi.
Since March the 27th, the government has declared EMCOs in 7 locations throughout the country to enable active tracing of COVID-19 cases after a high concentration of such cases were detected in those areas. In the meantime, Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri said, due to shortage of blood supply, prospective blood donors have been given the green light to leave home during the movement control order to donate blood. He said the National Blood Centre had requested for permission to operate and for the movement of blood donors to be allowed.
Mesyuarat pagi tadi dimaklumkan bahawa bekalan darah di tabung darah negara berkurangan sebanyak 33% sejak pelaksanaan PKP. Pusat Darah Negara telah memohon kebenaran untuk beroperasi dan pergerakan penderma darah untuk menderma darah.
He said donors are permitted to make trips to hospitals or health clinics during the MCO period to donate blood between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. The number of patients recovering from COVID-19 continues to rise, with 95 more discharged from hospital on Monday. The recovery rate of coronavirus in Malaysia is now 67.9%, or 3,957 cases. 40 new cases were also reported, 14 of them at the EMCO area near the Selayang wholesale market. One death was also recorded on Monday.
Kes kematian ke-99 iaitu kes 4,087 merupakan lelaki warga negara Malaysia berumur 78 tahun dan mempunyai latar belakang penyakit kencing manis, darah tinggi dan strok. Dia telah dirawat di Hospital Encik Besar Hajar Kalsum, Johor pada 7 April 2020 dan disahkan meninggal dunia pada 27 April 2020 jam 4.31 pagi.
In other COVID-19 clusters, there were an additional case each at Menara Plaza, City 1 and Selangor Mansion. Currently, the total number of cases detected in the country stands at 5,820. Meanwhile, Dr. Nur Hisham said Malaysia will increase its testing capabilities for COVID-19 to cover 22,000 tests per day by next week with 2 automated test processing machines. He said the automated processing machine, which could do 5,000 tests per day, would be placed at the Institute of Medical Research IMR in Kuala Lumpur by this weekend.
What is the benchmark? So if we look into the benchmark and the discussion with the team from China, so from their experience, 110 million population, they are only doing 30,000 tests a day. So we are increasing our capacity to about 22,000 tests a day, probably by next week or so. So capacity-wise, I think that's good.
Dr. Nur Hisham said Malaysia initially started with only 23 COVID-19 testing labs, and now the country has 43. On another issue, Dr. Nur Hisham said the Health Ministry, together with the Higher Education Ministry, has outlined several guidelines covering the health aspects for students who wish to return to their respective hometowns. The students will be screened before being allowed to travel to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and will have to follow the ministry's guidelines, including social distancing and paying attention to personal hygiene.
This will be a long run, for example, because as long as we do not have the vaccine, so vaccine, there's a lot of research been done, but perhaps it will take more than a year or 2. But in the meantime, what we need to do is to practice, take all the precautionary measures for us to break the transmission in the community.
The ministry also reminds the public to always abide to the MCO, and for those who have to go out to get groceries, they should limit the time at public areas and avoid crowded places. In Selangor, Pasar Besar Jalan Osman in Petaling Jaya, or better known as the PJ Old Town Market, was cordoned off for a disinfection exercise on Monday and will be closed for 5 days. This was informed by the PJ's City Council on its Facebook account. According to the post, the sanitation operation was conducted by the council's Health and Environment Department. The exercise was carried out after a trader at the Taman Megah Market had tested positive for the coronavirus last Friday. There are 578 traders at Pasar Besar Jalan Othman, and those who had been in contact with those traders between April the 5th and 18 are urged to undergo screening for the COVID-19 virus. The Social Security Organisation SOCSO's Prihatin screening program PSP for local and foreign essential workers during the Movement Control Order MCO has started its first phase on Monday. Registration for the screening can be done online through the PSP Perkeso website using an employee's identification number or foreign worker's social security number. In the first phase, employees working in COVID-19 high-risk zones are given priority to be screened at healthcare service providers appointed by SOCSO. In the second phase, which will be announced soon, the screening will be carried out at SOCSO's panel clinics. Details and requirements for the screening are also available on their website. The screening is provided free for all workers whose employers are registered with SOCSO. Petronas is confident that it can be braced through the COVID-19 pandemic and the slump in oil prices, which have resulted in an economic slowdown on the global frontier. Its President and Chief Executive Officer, Tan Sri Wan Zulkifli Wan Arifin, stressed the oil and gas industry is a cyclical industry and Petronas is well experienced to overcome these uncertainties. He also expects the global crude oil prices to stable from May onwards.
Harga minyak mentah juga mungkin dapat mencapai paras yang lebih stabil dengan persetujuan pengurangan pengeluaran oleh negara-negara OPEC Plus yang akan bermula pada Mei tahun ini sehingga April tahun 2022.
With the strengthening of the crude oil price, the global economy is expected to gradually recover by the year's end and record better growth in 2021. Fuel demand dwindled following the reduction in economic activities, which resulted in Brent crude barely touching the $20 level last week, the lowest in 2 decades. Whereas the US oil price, the WTI futures, dived to the negative territory for the first time in history for the May contract. All new applications and appeals for Bantuan Prihatin Nasional (BPN) should be made by April the 30th. The Inland Revenue Board, in a statement on Monday, said each new application or appeal received would be processed starting next month. For approved applications, the lump sum payment will also be made in May. The board said households or single individuals who meet the criteria but are not listed or whose applications were not approved can do so through the official BPN portal. For more information, applicants can refer to the BPN Frequently Asked Questions uploaded on its official portal. People who may have inquiries can contact the board by the methods shown on the screen. BPN is a one-off cash aid offered by the government through the Prihatin package to ease the financial burden of the B40 and M40 citizens affected by the COVID-19 outbreak. Police cripple a drug smuggling syndicate in Johor. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Senior Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob on Monday urged the public to keep calm following the increase in negative sentiments towards the Rohingya community amid the COVID-19 crisis. The minister said police were aware that there are videos, audio recordings and articles which are inciting anger against the Rohingya. He pointed out that the authorities are investigating the authenticity of the material.
Akhir-akhir ini, sewaktu PKP, tiba-tiba isu ini menjadi besar. Dan ini juga menghairankan pihak berkuasa, pihak polis terutamanya, kerana akhir-akhir ini terlalu banyak berita-berita melalui media sosial, video dan sebagainya yang dikeluarkan, yang menimbulkan kemarahan rakyat kepada mereka. Jadi pihak polis sedang menyiasat perkara ini. Sebab ada juga yang menganggap setengah-setengah video, setengah-setengah audio itu adalah palsu. Walaupun tidak ada siapa yang boleh menentukan kesahihan palsu atau tidak kecuali pihak polis.
tensions against the Rohingya community are believed to have stemmed from a statement attributed to the head of the Myanmar ethnic Rohingya human rights organization Malaysia, Zafar Ahmad Abdul Ghani. Zafar was accused of demanding citizenship for the Rohingya, a claim he has repeatedly denied. At the same time, a coalition of 17 Rohingya-linked groups in Myanmar and Malaysia have issued a joint statement to apologize to the government and all Malaysians. A deputy minister and a state exco are set to be charged with breaching the movement control order on Tuesday. Perak Police Chief Dato' Razaduddin Hussain, when contacted, said the duo will be charged under the Prevention and Control of Infectious Diseases measures within the infected local areas regulations. The two are expected to be charged at the Gerik Magistrates Court. The two came under fire after photographs emerged showing them attending a lunch event at a religious school in Perak. They have since issued apologies over the incident. In Johor, police have arrested a man with a Datuk title believed to be the mastermind of a syndicate smuggling drugs into Indonesia. The suspect, who has influence at the Felda areas in Kota Tinggi, was among 12 people nabbed in 3 separate arrests on Thursday and Friday. State Police Chief Datuk Ayub Khan Maidin Pichai said 3 male suspects were first arrested in Pengerang on April the 23rd. This led to the arrest of another 5 men as well as 3 women in Felda Bukit Aping the following day. They included the main suspect known as Datuk Ajim, who has past criminal records for drugs, and his 2 children. Another woman was held the same day in Taman Bayu Damai, Kota Tinggi. The 3 raids also saw drugs, including shabu worth 293,260 ringgit seized. Also seized were property amounting to 181,969 ringgit. All those detained aged between 17 and 47 have been remanded for a week to facilitate investigations under the Dangerous Drugs Act. COVID-19 cases in Indonesia surpass 9,000. The details when we return. On to the foreign front. Singapore confirmed 799 new COVID-19 cases on Monday, taking the total count to 14,423. According to the Health Ministry, 14 of the new cases were Singaporeans and permanent residents, while the vast majority of the new patients were work permit holders residing in dormitories housing migrant workers. From Sunday's tally of 13,624, Singapore classified 11,419 as dorm residents, or about 3.5% from the total of about 323,000 foreign workers staying in dormitories. As at noon Sunday, Singapore recorded 931 new cases of COVID-19 infections, of which about 95% were dorm residents, while 25 cases involved work permit holders residing outside dormitories. There were also 2 imported cases and 18 cases in the community. Singapore's largest active cluster remains S11 dormitory in Punggol, which has 2,275 confirmed cases as of Sunday, about 16% of the country's total. And over in Indonesia, the total number of COVID-19 positive cases in the country has crossed the 9,000 mark, with death cases rising to 765. The Indonesian government spokesman on COVID-19, Ahmad Yuryanto, said there were 214 new positive cases in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of positive cases to 9,096. Yuryanto said there were 22 more deaths in... Meanwhile, in China, tens of thousands of students returned to school in Shanghai and Beijing on Monday after months of closure intended to curb the spread of the coronavirus. In Shanghai, only students in their final year of middle and high school were allowed to return to classrooms, while in Beijing, only high school seniors were allowed back on campus to prepare for the all-important university entrance exam. China has largely curbed the spread of the deadly disease, but is still on high alert, with growing fears of imported cases and a second wave of domestic infections in the northeast. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern on Monday claimed that the nation had scored a significant victory against the spread of COVID-19 as the country began a phased exit from lockdown. After nearly 5 weeks of the maximum level 4 restrictions, with only essential services operating, the country will move to level 3 late on Monday. That will allow some businesses, takeaway food outlets and schools to reopen. The easing of restrictions came as New Zealand, a nation of 5 million people, reported only one new case of COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, taking the total to 1,122 with 19 deaths. Italy's Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte announced Sunday that his country will soon begin the process of reopening its economy after undergoing the longest novel coronavirus lockdown anywhere to date. In a nationwide television address, Conte said the measures would be relaxed from May the 4th, with people being allowed to visit their relatives in small numbers. Conte also said if all goes well, stores and museums would reopen beginning May 18th and sports teams could resume group training. Restaurants, cafes and hair salons, meanwhile, would be allowed to reopen on June the 1st. So far, there were 260 new virus-related deaths on Sunday, the lowest daily figure since March the 14th. Now let's take a look at the highlights of Malaysia's main newspapers for Tuesday, April the 28th. The New Straits Times focuses on the systematic send-off for the first batch of university students who left their homes under close supervision, while Harian Metro highlights on the upcoming interstate travels during the MCO, which are expected to involve 300,000 travellers. Berita Harian focuses on a statement by the Health Director General that the nation is entering the recovery phase from the COVID-19 pandemic, with the Malaysian Reserve putting a special report on the impact of the working from home culture due to the extension of the MCO. Do get your copies today or subscribe to the e-paper. That's all from Nightline. In Switzerland, a French land artist known for creating huge pieces of grass recently unveiled a new giant artwork called Beyond Crisis, made in the Swiss Alps, to send a message of hope and positivity to the world in these difficult times of the coronavirus pandemic. Take a look. I'm Brandon Wong. Thank you for watching and take care.